Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Business Suit, the podcast that gives you the information and inspiration you need to thrive at work and beyond. I'm Kylie Carr, your host, and I am excited to be with all of you today, as always. And before I introduce today's guest, I wanted to hear where you're logging in from. So if wherever you are watching us from, please put that in the chat. Let us know. If you have any questions throughout our conversation today, please put them in the chat. We will do our best to answer as many as possible. There is a little bit of a lag, so be patient with us as we see them once you post them. But we will be sure to cover as many as we can today. So today I am thrilled to have Dee Ann Turner here with us today. Dee Ann is a best-selling author of 3 books, including Crush Your Career, Ace the Interview, Land the Job, and Launch Your Future. I have it right here, which launched earlier this year. She is also an international speaker, podcast host of the Crush Your Career podcast, which, by the way, I had the pleasure of being on. So you'll have to check out that episode. And she's also a retired vice president of talent for Chick-fil-A, where she was for over 3 decades, which I don't understand because she only looks like she's about 40. So at least, or not even. So, but at her tenure at Chick-fil-A, she impacted that organization tremendously. She helped shape that company's culture. And it's one that so many of us know as a very unique culture that has been remarkable. She has an unparalleled insight and experience in talent acquisition, career and leadership development, and organizational culture. And I know we are going to have a fantastic conversation today. This is not Dee Ann's first time. I'm going to bring her on. This is her second time on Beyond the Business Suit. The last time we had Dee Ann on, I was very pregnant. So if you haven't seen that episode or listened to that episode, it's episode, I wrote it down, 63 from March 2016. And it was a great, great conversation. And I am thrilled to have you back, Dee Ann. Welcome.
Well, it is my pleasure to be here. I 2016, I'm not sure I remember 2016. So
tell me about it.
But it's great to be with you again, Kylie.
Oh, thank you for being back with us. And at the time, I mean, you were still at Chick-fil-A. Like I said, I was very pregnant. And I think after we stopped recording, I was asking you some advice as a mother. And in fact, our episode didn't even go live until I think 5 or 6 days after I had my daughter. So I think it was the first one scheduled after I had my daughter, and she's now 5. So
time has flown.
It has flown. Well, I am thrilled to be here to talk to you, to gain your insight, to have our audience hear from you, especially given your new book, Crush Your Career. And there's so much that you have expressed through this book based upon your experience in being in the talent acquisition and development space for such a long time. And since we last spoke, since we last had you on Beyond the Business Suit, not since we last spoke, because I've been on Crush Your Career podcast too, but since we had you on Beyond the Business Suit, you have a new career. So before we get into the book and your insights there, I would love to hear you talk about some of your personal experience making the transition from being a big time corporate executive to being a big time business owner.
Well, as you know, it's quite the shift, and so many of your audience, I'm sure, are familiar with it as well. But I have to actually go way back. I mean, way back, Kylie, to when I was 8 years old. And when I was 8 years old, there are 2 things I wanted to be. I wanted to be a writer, number one, above everything else. But I also had this entrepreneurial bent. I opened my first business when I was 8 years old, and continued to grow in that whole entrepreneurial world. So I'm surprised that it's this stage in life that I got here, but I finally arrived at the place I wanted to be when I was 8. But without going into the long story, but spending 33 years at Chick-fil-A. And then after that, there was an opportunity to take a voluntary early retirement option. There were about 100 Chick-fil-A staff members, long-term people that had this opportunity. And at the exact time that this came about, I had received a contract to write 2 more books for Baker Publishing. And that was my dream come true since I was 8 years old. There it was. But I knew I couldn't lead that function because I'd already written 1 book and I knew what kind of time it took. I really didn't feel like I could lead a function at Chick-fil-A and go all in on being an author and what all that entails. So it was my opportunity, and I took it and started my own company. And I have to say, when I started out, I envisioned that it was going to be 25% writing, 25% speaking, 25% consulting, and 25% coaching. But that's really not what happened at all. It was a whole lot of writing because I was on deadlines for 2 new books, a lot of speaking to promote those, just enough consulting to keep me fresh with what was going on in the marketplace. And the coaching's kind of been here and there as people fit more into my schedule than I fit into theirs. And that surprised me. I thought it was going to be a lot different. And I think it will be at different seasons. But the last 3 years have been about getting these 2 books, Bet on Talent and Crush Your Career, finished and out into the marketplace. And so then that led to lots of other things. And I was telling you, before we came on stage here, is that I've learned so much. It's been I'm a lifelong learner. And if you're familiar with StrengthsFinder, learner is in my top 5. And so I've learned to do some things I thought I would never do, like manage my own books. I'm not a numbers person. I didn't like accounting in college. I had to take it to get my degree, but I did not like it at all. And here I am, it's something I'm disciplined about and I do every month, just like I'm supposed to. I learned all about SEO and websites and social media and how to do a podcast and how to do launch teams to market books. And it's just been an incredible time of learning. And I want to encourage other people, sometimes I don't think we ever really retire. We just go to our next calling, whatever that is. And, or maybe it's a different application of the same calling, which is kind of what I feel like I'm doing.
I love that. And I also love that you just mentioned callings. And that's something that we talk a lot about on Beyond the Business Suit. In fact, I think the last time we spoke, we talked about callings as well. I would love for you to share with us because I know you talk about callings. What's the difference for people who are like, okay, am I in my calling? Do I have a calling? What's the difference between a career and a calling?
Well, when it hits the sweet spot, they actually match up. I was fortunate to have that experience, but it didn't start out that way for me. I already told you that I wanted to be a writer. And when I got out of school, times were really, really hard. Not like now because we didn't have a global pandemic, but we were in a major recession here in the US and jobs were scarce. And I didn't have the experience that anybody would want to read about at that time. So I had to abandon this idea at the moment that I was going to be a writer. And I decided to use my skills in the advertising field, which is what a lot of journalism majors do. And that's how I ended up at Chick-fil-A. I was actually interviewing for an advertising job. So here I was about 3 years in my job, and I have that aha moment, which is, wait a minute, I was going to be writing. In fact, I married a pastor, so I saw myself in full-time ministry at the time, full-time writing full-time in a faith-based way, if you will. And that's what I saw myself doing. I thought, I've abandoned my calling. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then it hit me that my calling wasn't those things at all. Those were ways that I would live out my calling, but my calling was to help other people find their calling. And that's the work I was doing at Chick-fil-A, is helping people, find the work they were made for. Especially when I think about all my time that I spent selecting franchisees and people who work for years and years for an opportunity to lead others and influence a community. And so for me, it was the sweet spot in between. Not everybody finds that their calling and their career is necessarily the same thing. Hopefully they're able to use some of the skills that they use in their calling. And so they do that avocationally. They find a volunteer organization to serve because they feel like that, at this season of life, those things for whatever reason can't match up. Maybe it's a financial reason. Maybe it's an availability in their career path. And they just can't match those things up at the same time. So they have one role that's a career, and they live out some of those passions that they feel like the work they were made to do avocationally in other areas.
That makes sense. And I know we live in a culture right now where there's so many side hustles and people are on the quest for their callings. And I love how you describe both of those scenarios of aligning your career with your calling, but also you may have a career or a job that's outside of your calling, but you're still doing both, even if they're not aligned. I think for some people, and I talk to so many, especially women who've climbed that ladder and they've achieved some level of success, but they've lost the meaning, and or maybe they never even found it. Maybe that they never even thought that it could be possible. So the fact that you even said that, I think will be inspiring for some people to know that, oh, I can work for someone else and still be aligned with my calling. But I need to figure out what that is. So what are some steps that you think people can take to understand what their callings are?
Sure. I think the first thing is to just do some self evaluation. What do I do best, better than most people? And understanding strengths, obviously, but just what skills are just better than most people. Secondly, is asking for that advice from others who know you well. Sometimes people discover things in you that you never see in yourself. That happened to me at Chick-fil-A. The former president of Chick-fil-A, Jimmy Collins, was my mentor there, and he was also my sponsor and champion. And he saw something in me that I didn't see about this career and being able to strengthen organizational culture and identify and grow talent. It was not anything that ever crossed my mind before Jimmy's influence on me. So other people can help you discover what you do. I encourage people to look at the world and say, what problem needs to be solved that I can solve? And you might be surprised to find that your calling is in that very thing, because that's where you realize, hey, I have some unique skills, abilities to solve this problem. And lastly, I talk about, consider what gets you up in the morning. What is it that just, I know when I finally figured this out about that my path was to help other people find their path, I couldn't wait to get to work on Monday morning. And I sort of didn't like to leave on Friday, because I was so into what I was doing and I enjoyed that so much. And if you have that thing in your life, that you have that kind of passion, it's a real possibility that that's connected to your calling.
Yes, and I know that feeling, and I know the opposite feeling too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I do. It's funny, but that was one of the reasons I decided to take the retirement at Chick-fil-A, is because I had in 2014, the founder's grandson had become the chief people officer, and it was time for him to do his thing. So in 2015, I moved to start a new function at Chick-fil-A. I loved building the team. It was a huge leadership development opportunity for me to lead something that I didn't have expertise in. But ultimately, I'm sitting there one day in a meeting after this retirement opportunity has been presented, and I'm in the meeting and I'm leading it, and we're talking about plastic straws and mixed use packaging. Now, that's very important in the world of sustainability, no question. But I just had that moment. It's like, this is not what I was made to do. It just, I had people on my team, that's what they were made to do, and they were passionate about it and had so much knowledge, but I wanted to help people grow their careers. And so that was one of the reasons I was living outside of my calling, and I knew it. And that was part of the reason I made the change.
Beautiful. I know that you, throughout your career, I'm sure there were a lot of barriers that you broke. There were ceilings that you broke, and I'm sure you were an inspirational leader to so many people at Chick-fil-A, especially women. How did you find your voice?
Well, first of all, I hope that I was inspirational, and some really extraordinarily talented women have come behind me. But I have to give credit to the men, because when you're in an organization and you're the first female to accomplish something, or the first of anything, somebody had to help you get there. And so I had, like I said, in Jimmy Collins, such a sponsor and mentor and champion to help me do that. And that was part of it, is having that mentorship. My dad was a huge mentor too. I could call him up and I could say, Dad, this is what's going on. What are these guys thinking? Help me understand this. Help me understand their perspective. And he would give me really good counsel. Sometimes he was really tough on me and gave me really good counsel to that. I had my first boss at Chick-fil-A gave me some great advice early on. And we may have talked about this in other interviews, Kylie, but it was pivotal advice for my career. And one day he just walked out and he said, look, you're young and you're female. Now get over it and win them over with your competency. And that was those were powerful words, especially, and probably maybe some of the younger women listening to this day are stunned by that comment, but this was 30 some odd years ago and things were very different. And yet he was telling me, you know what, if you want to make it, you're going to have to stop focusing on the things you can't control and focus on what you can win them over with. And so that was really what I tried to focus on, because all of us who consider ourselves, in a classification of difference, what we really want is a level playing field and the opportunity to win people over with our competence and to be recognized for those skills that we have. And so I thought that was really important. It's advice that I shared with a lot of women who came behind me. It's like, don't get too focused on these things. Those things are out of your control. What's in your control is your character and your competency and how you relate with others through your chemistry and those interactions.
Right. And how he positioned it too, I think, I don't know how you took it, but I would imagine it could also elicit some confidence too. And what we find, even in research, is that it's competence and confidence are really aligned in terms of how people perceive us. So if we are in a group that's perhaps underrepresented or even underestimated, we may have the competence, but we feel a lack of confidence that we're not going to be taken as seriously. So for him to say, okay, get over that.
Yeah.
You are competent, like own that,
right.
And like lead with that. And I got a sense of that owning it too, which can help communicate that competence in a strong way.
Yeah, I do think they're very closely related. And it takes me back to that comment about Jimmy Collins being my mentor. That was one of the things that he really did, was help me be more confident by having confidence in me and expressing that confidence. And that made me more confident, which I think helped in my career.
That's great. What advice would you have given your younger self that based on what you've learned over time?
Oh, there's so much, Kylie. First of all, it's important and it's not so important all at the same time. There's nothing like walking out of an organization after 33 years. And I mean, I was all in and I love that organization. I love the culture. I love the people of the organization. I care deeply about its purpose and mission and the people trying to live all that out. But and I knew it before I left. It wasn't a surprise to me. But then you walk out and that's done. And just a few years later, it feels like you were almost never there, which is an odd feeling, to spend your life somewhere, your whole adult life somewhere, and go, it felt like I was never there. And you just need to keep things in perspective. Do a great job, love what you do, pour yourself into it, succeed, achieve what you want to achieve. But just remember, it's just one part of who you are. And there's a lot of other things in your life that need your attention as well. And don't raise it to a level of importance that basically I'm saying don't sell out to everything else in your life, because it's just one piece of everything that you are. I think that I would tell my younger self, take better care of yourself earlier. And I love this new generation because they already have that ingrained in them. The millennials and Gen Z, they're all over this. But if you're one of those who's not taking care of yourself, no one else is going to do that for you. And I was talking to a young lady yesterday who wasn't making the time. She loves her job. She's all into it. She's got a lot of responsibility at a young age. She is crushing it, but she's not spending the time on herself. She's not making enough time to learn, to read good books, to listen to podcasts, to attend that virtual conference or that live conference. She's not exercising like she was when she was in college. And I said, hey, if you don't do it the first hour of the day, you're not going to get it done because everything else is going to be more important as your day goes on. So I did that about 10 years into my career. I started dedicating that first hour of my day to taking care of Dee Ann in all the ways, physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, etc. And it was the best change I made, not just personally, but I was a much better leader after I did that too.
I believe it. I believe it. And I hope that those of you who are listening or watching us will take that to heart because, I mean, life is too short. So it's something as I feel like it's so simple. Okay, first hour of the day, that's for me. That
Yeah.
is for me. And we cannot pour from an empty cup. I just posted something on Instagram yesterday that said, you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to earn rest. And it's like, okay, let's take care of ourselves. Let's make sure that we are, have alignment and we are, feeling in a great place, mind, body, and spirit. And then we can show up in all of the spaces and the ways that we do as well as we can. And we can't do that if we're on E.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. And that kind of takes me to another thought I learned recently, too. I was interviewing Dana Spinola, the CEO of Fabric, and
Mm.
she shared something with me that you might appreciate as a mother of a younger child, Kylie. And she said, there's no such thing as balance. Balance is a complete myth. I
Yeah.
tried to have balance all these years. She said, now I pursue presence.
Ooh,
And
yes.
she said, being present wherever I am is now my goal. And after she said that to me, even at my stage of life with grown children, so owning my own business, I was trying to, everywhere I went, I was still working because I had my own business, right? Well, the
Mhm.
last few times I went on a girlfriend's trip, 4 weeks or so ago, we finally got to get out. I put it all down. I put that out of office reply on my computer, on my email. And I, as a business owner, because my responsibility, every morning I checked and then I was done. That was
Mm.
it. I let it all go. And then I was on vacation with my family last week, my adult children. We were all there together. Same thing. It's like, I'm going to be present. Now, this week, I have burned it up, but I've been present in my work. And I really appreciated that advice from Dana. And if I could talk to Dee Ann as a younger person, I'd say, don't focus on balance. Just be present where you are.
That is a gem. I mean, I got tears in my eyes. That is it. That is it. We hear, and I often have said over the years, I don't believe in work-life balance, and it makes me cringe every time I'm moderating a panel, speaking on a panel, watching a panel of all women, and there is inevitably someone typically younger in her career who says, can you talk about work-life balance and how you can have work-life balance? And I'm like, why are we asking the question?
Yeah,
That does not exist. And people have said, work-life management, which I get, work-life harmony, which I get, but presence, that is it. That gives me goosebumps. That feels true. That feels true. And it's not like you're juggling. It's not like you're making anything happen. It's like, no, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here wherever here is. And so thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
absolutely.
Well, I know that we may have many people watching or listening who are in career transitions, and you just wrote a book on crush your career. So let's talk about how we can crush our careers. And particularly would love to hear you talk about those first 90 days. And I know you have a whole chapter on the first 90 days and how that can make or break someone's career in especially a new organization or maybe even a new role within an organization. I would love for you to talk about this even from a perspective of leaders. I know a lot of people in our audience, they are leaders of teams, they're leaders of organizations. So what are some of those key things they need to be mindful of within those first 90 days, and why are those first 90 days so important?
Well, it used to be, I don't know how many organizations still do this, but, it was that 90-day probationary period. We used to joke it when people asked at Chick-fil-A, "Well, I have a probationary period." We said the interview process was your probationary period because it was so thorough. But I
I've
think,
heard about that at
yeah,
Chick-fil-A.
but I think the first 90 days do make or can make or break your whole career in an organization when you're starting the new job in an organization or you're starting a new role in the same organization. I think it's really important. So there are three things I really encourage people to focus on and kind of having their plan as they walk in the door. There are three elements to focus on. The first is culture. Now, let me say this. You should have known about the culture, the mission, the values, the purpose of the organization. You should have known those things before you went to work there. I'm not necessarily talking about that part of the culture. That's the foundational part. I'm talking about learning how things get done, how decisions are made, who the influencers are in the organization, and just the unwritten rules of the organization. So, how do you learn that? Well, we go to the second thing that you need to focus on your first 90 days, building relationships. That's going to get you where you want to go. Startling idea. Think about this with me for a minute. All the most important decisions about your career will be made when you aren't in the room.
Wow.
Whether or not you get selected will be that decision will be made when you're not in the room. If you get promoted, how you're compensated, when somebody decides you've reached your peak, whether or not you get selected for the prime team or the prime project to work on, all those decisions are made when you're not in the room. So the implication to this is clear. If you're not in the room when those decisions are made, you need somebody in the room advocating for you. So you're going to get that by building relationships at all levels of the organization. That's how you gain respect. So how do I start doing that when I'm a brand new person to a team? Well, the first thing to do is ask your boss, who do I need to build a relationship? And you start with your own team, having coffee or lunch virtually or in person, and build out from there. Who does your team serve? That would be your next logical group. Who has your boss told you are influencers in the company that you should establish a relationship with? And you want to collect relationships almost like a hobby. Like, how many different people can I form a relationship with? Because you never know how that collaboration is going to serve you or the other person in the organization. So that's the second thing in 90 days. Hit the blocks, building relationships. And once you're known as someone who builds relationships, people will actually be seeking you out to build a relationship. Now, here's the third thing. The third thing is managing your performance and being very clear in that first 90 days. What are the expectations of your role? What does success look like in the first 90 days, the first 6 months, the first year? You want to be sure that you have a relationship going with your boss, that you clearly understand the expectations right from the gate. You don't want to find that out a year in that you missed all the goals because you didn't really understand the expectations. So clarify your role. Yes, you should have known what it was when you were selected, but so what happens in some organizations, they select you, they figure out more about what your talent is, and then they decide, well, this could be part of the role too. So when you start, you want to clarify the role. You want to set those goals with your boss. What are we going to accomplish? And then how will that be evaluated? Be sure you understand all of those things from the get-go. And then you want to revisit that. So if your boss does a one-on-one monthly or quarterly, hopefully they do, it's great to talk about how the family's going and personal life and get to know you. Those are important things. Be sure you do that, but be sure that you go prepared to every one of those conversations to clarify your role, clarify the goals and expectations. And then as you start gaining results, talk in a results language. Tell them what's being achieved in results. Don't talk about the task you've accomplished, but the results you've achieved. So those are my three big things, a way to start a job great.
Those are excellent, excellent. And for those of you who are just joining us, watching us on LinkedIn or on Facebook, I am here with Dee Ann Turner, the author of Crush Your Career, amongst other books. But today we're talking about how we can crush our career. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and we will address as many as we can. One of the things when I think about crushing my career and what that means, and even the energy with that, there's a sense of ownership. And so what does it mean to own one's career, and what are some of the things that one needs to do in order to do that so that they can crush it, but also tactically for those of us who are listening and wondering, okay, what can I do? Like, what can I do over the next week, the next month, the next 6 months to gain more ownership of my career? What advice would you have?
Sure. Well, let's just build off of what we were just talking about, because I think those three things, diving deep into the culture, growing the relationships, and understanding performance expectations, are the first part of owning your career. When I started working at Chick-fil-A, my mentor again, Jimmy Collins, he used to say, "It's a do-it-yourself world." I thought that was an interesting comment. Then we went through a phase where we didn't repeat that quote very often. It's like, well, it's not really a do it yourself. We as the company are here to help you grow your career. And here's all the things we're going to provide for you to do that. And then it seems like the world is shifting again. And I think it's really a hybrid. If you're fortunate enough to work for an organization that offers you opportunities to grow, then take advantage of every single one you can. I remember when I had the opportunity, so this is kind of funny, Kylie. I actually complained a little bit that we had sent many men in our organization to the Harvard Business School Advanced Management Program. That's their premier executive education program. And the funny thing about when you complain, sometimes then they come back and they decide, well, then you can go. And I had young children at home at the time, and I was going to be gone for 10 weeks. And that was a really, really challenging decision for me. My husband and I talked about it a long time, and we decided it was an opportunity that I just couldn't turn down. And we made it work. And we didn't even have FaceTime back then. This was right before all that started happening, but we did have video calling and Skyping at that time. So we made it work. And I'm glad I did. That was a priceless opportunity. But we have to take advantage of those. And some people are sitting in a situation, they're not owning their career because they're not taking advantage of the very opportunities that are given to them. Let's say you're an organization that doesn't support that. Well, then you have to take even more ownership, because if you want to grow, you're going to have to plot that growth for yourself. So there was a quote, I think it was Zig Ziglar, said, "You'll be the same person 5 years from now as you are today, except for the people that you meet and the books that you read." Well, I've added to that the blogs that you write, the podcasts you listen to, the YouTube videos that you watch, all of those things. But there is so much, there's never been more free content in the world for you to learn from. And one of the things I love about my Gen Z son is you can ask him any question. And, while I'm still wondering what the answer is, he's already found it in a YouTube video or an interview or something out there in Google land. And so there's no reason not to learn and to grow and to be a lifelong learner. But owning your career is about taking responsibility for your own personal growth. And whether that's taking advantage of what's offered to you or creating your own path, you have to own it, and you have to be determined that it's a do-it-yourself world as far as your career is concerned, and you're going to do everything you can to add value to yourself.
That is spot on. Spot on. We need to take more ownership. It always cracks me up when my daughter asks me a question and I say, "Sweetie, well, I don't know." And she said, "Well, Google it."
Yeah, Mom, just Google it.
Just Google it. It could be, well, what was, my father's grandfather's paternal grandfather's middle name. I'm like, I don't know. Well, Google it. Well, we can't Google everything, sweetie. Oh, well, we are at the time of our session, our conversation that we call the Final Five. This is our quick fire round to get to know you a little bit better. If anyone has any questions, this is the last call. Put it in the chat, and we will try to address at least one of them if we have any. But first, Dee Ann, I would like for you to select 5 numbers for me. 5 numbers between the numbers of 1 and 22.
You like me to say those out loud?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
No
out loud.
worries.
And then I will give you questions that correspond to those 5.
Okay. 7, 12, 14, 22, 25,
22 is
and
the last number.
I'm sorry.
From 1 to 22. So we don't
Oh,
have
I thought you said
25.
25. Oh, okay. All right. So let's try that again.
So only
Um,
one more.
okay.
7, 12, 14, 22, and one more number.
And 9.
9. Perfect. Okay. The first question is, what is one book that has significantly impacted your life?
Oh, one book. All right. It's a toss up. I got to tell you two because I just have
Okay.
to.
I'll let you do it.
Well, because one is more for your audience and one is for me. The most impactful book to my life and career was Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Integrity. I think everyone should read it. I've read it many times. It helped me with self awareness and understanding the difference between my intent and my impact. So it was pivotal for me. But the book that I've read since I retired, that I wish it's the book I wish had been around when I was 25, is Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
That is a great one. In fact, I run a community called the Beyond Community, and that what we launched it in January, and that was the first book that we read as a community in January, which was a perfect time of year to
Yeah,
read it.
exactly.
Oh, I love James Clear. I love his writings. Oh, great one.
Yeah,
Awesome. And that's the first time I think somebody has mentioned it. So I'm glad you did. So
good.
the next question is, if you could have brunch with 3 people, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Oh my. First, my maternal grandmother. I
Hmm.
never met her. She died before I was born, and I just, it just would be very interesting to me to get to meet her. Um, the second would probably be my future great grandchild. I'm not sure I'll be around for that. And so I would jump into the future and have brunch with some of my descendants. So the ancestors and descendants. And then I have to say, probably the Apostle Paul, because I have a heart for missions, and his work was so influential, and his writings were so influential on me in that space. So that'd be my 3 picks.
I love that. The next question is, what is, or who is one person you absolutely adore and look up to?
Wow. My mother,
Hmm.
uh, she is an incredible woman, and has been a role model in so many ways in my life. She sacrificed a lot for me to have the life that I've had, and even to pursue the career that I did. And so I just really admire my mother.
Beautiful. The next question is, what are 3 of your favorite things, people not included?
3 of my favorite things. Well, my newest favorite thing, you mentioned Pelotoning, and I still love my Peloton when the weather's not pretty. But my husband gave me an e bike for Christmas. And
Ah.
I live in a community that has over 100 miles of multi use paths for biking and walking. And so just about every day, weather permitting, I go about 12 to 15 miles on that bike, and I absolutely love it. Secondly, would be my paddleboard. That's the other thing I enjoy doing, and we're about to paddleboard season, so I enjoy that. And then, gosh, number 3 thing. I'm not such a thing person. I am a people person. Number, you know, it's probably that electronic item that keeps me connected to the world. And it's probably my iPad because it's so portable and big enough for me to see, bigger than my phone. My phone's not my favorite thing, and it interferes with my life too much. But probably iPad. That's not really a good answer, but when you said things, that's what I came away with.
Hey, it's an honest answer. That's all we're asking for. The final question is, what is one of the or some of the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, I've shared some of it already with you today. Probably just that statement: take good care of yourself. Um, and we don't um, people tell us that. They tell us all the time, take care, or they say, take good care. You hear that a lot when people
Mhm.
close a conversation, but do you really take it to heart? Take good care of yourself. You can't take care of anybody else till you take good care of you. And, it's a stewardship issue of taking care of your life in every possible way, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, all of those things. So that's my advice. Take good care of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's such a throwaway phrase, like, "Oh, take care, take care."
Yep.
So I love that bringing some consciousness back into that statement. That's great. Well, I do have a bonus question, Deanne, and that
All
is,
right.
how can people connect with you online, on social media? And I'll toss in there, how can they buy your book?
Absolutely. Okay, so the first place is deeannturner.com, Deeann Turner.com. You can actually do all of the things I'm about to tell you. If you can't remember anything else, you can go directly there and it's all there. My books are there. All episodes of the podcast are on there. So I want you to visit the Crush Your Career podcast. We've had some great guests. We just finished season 1 of it. Also, there you'll see all the places to connect with me on social media. So I really hope this group will connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow me at Dee Ann Turner Author on Facebook, at Dee Ann Turner on Instagram, and at Dee Ann Turner on Twitter. By the way, when you go to deeannturner.com, if you're somebody who selects talent, there are 25 of my top behavioral interviewing questions there. If you're someone interviewing for a job, it's a great download because it's good to practice. They're common questions and they're good to practice with. And then lastly, Crush Your Career and Bet on Talent are available anywhere books are sold, including on my website, but also on Amazon, of course.
Wonderful. Deanne, thank you for being so generous with your time and your wisdom, and for sharing your perspective and your wisdom with us today. I adore you. I love all that you're doing in the world, and how you're serving in this season of your life and in your career. And you are obviously crushing your career and aligned with your calling. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kylie. It's been my pleasure, and I adore you as well. So I'm glad we had this opportunity to visit once again.
Wonderful. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Please follow Deanne, buy her books, learn from her, and reach out to her too as you're learning more and implementing a lot of her wisdom and her learnings into the work that you're doing as well. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day. I will see you next time. In the meantime, shine that light that only you have for the world to see, because when you do, it gives others permission to do the same. Be well, everyone.